Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Joining me on this episode of Writers at Work is Wesley Brown, whose latest novel is Looking for Frank Wills. It's part of McSweeney's Of the Diaspora series that also included Wesley's debut novel, Tragic Magic, originally published in 1978 and celebrated by James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and others. Wesley Brown is the author of 3 novels, a novella, a short story collection, and 5 plays. He also edited several anthologies and wrote the narration for the segment of the PBS documentary W.E.B. Du Bois, a biography in 4 voices. He is a professor emeritus in English at Rutgers University and a former visiting professor at Bard. For readers and American history buffs, the name Frank Wills may ring a bell. Wills was a security guard who in 1972 discovered the Watergate burglars mid-break-in. Without Wills's diligence, there may have been no Watergate scandal, and without Watergate, the Nixon administration may not have been held accountable for its criminal behavior that resulted in Nixon's resignation as president. I found Wesley's Looking for Frank Wills an ingenious way to tell a story of a man's life through the eyes of Wills' barber at Wayne's Clip and Trim in North Augusta, South Carolina. I'd like to dig into that conceit. Wesley Brown, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be here, and that you invited me.
Wesley, you and I are about the same age. I remember the name Frank Wills and his very brief dance with fame. Was there something about him that stayed with you across the years?
I guess for the most part that he was an outlier, someone who was caught up in events unexpectedly and was kind of, messed around or joggled about, enjoying the attention for a while, but ultimately it didn't serve him very well. And he kind of sunk into a kind of recluseness, and eventually he didn't come to a very auspicious end.
Yeah, Looking for Frank Wills is a novel, not a biography, which gives you a certain license to interpret and invent. In fact, you deviate significantly from the recorded facts of Will's life. Was that always your intention?
Yes. I'm a novelist, so I guess like E.L. Doctorow, I'm interested in what's not in the chronology or the chronology of facts about someone's life. And I'm more interested in trying to imagine myself into a particular character, obviously who's not myself, but paying more attention to how I would reimagine someone's existence rather than following, the details of their actual life.
Yeah. Did you do much research? And I ask for a specific reason, because I found Frank Wills to be both vivid and yet still a bit of a mystery.
There is a short biography by Adam Hennig that I read, which was useful in terms of sort of the facts of Wills's life. Born in very humble circumstances, raised by a single mother, very unassuming, didn't do well in school, dropped out, had some, didn't go into the armed services, I guess was denied because of some physical ailment of some kind, and was in Job Corps, and then got this job as a security guard at the Watergate Hotel. And then, of course, the events set in motion by that phone call sent him spiraling into, recognition or notoriety for a bit, and then sort of being shuttled off to the periphery, and ultimately sort of finding himself sort of etherized out of the existence of this, tumultuous and historical event.
Yeah, I like that word, etherized. What I found fascinating was your choice to leave him somewhat amorphous. I never had the sense that you were imposing your Frank Wills on me. You left me enough room to come up with my own Frank Wills.
Yeah, I didn't want to write it from the first person because for me, would have assumed certain things that I would know. And I think for me, writing a novel or any work of fiction is more about not knowing. And by using the first person, it would presume that the narrator, I guess by extension, me, knows something about Frank Wills or has prior knowledge of his psyche. And I didn't want to do that. So I invented this character, Wayne, to use as a kind of guide through the details or the emotional life of Frank Wills, which seemed to me to work better.
Yeah, the narrator, Wayne Beasley, the proprietor of Wayne's Clip and Trim, uh, we see Wills through his eyes, and Beasley seems entirely reliable. Can you tell us how you developed that character?
It was accidental. I don't have a recollection of ever having decided consciously that I wanted to write this novel from the point of view of someone like Wayne Beasley. It just I can kind of happen, and I can't point to any particular uh, circumstances or event that led me to that decision. You know, like writing most novels for me, many things which I trust are accidental and they don't occur to me or announce themselves to me except through the act of writing.
I see. My grandfather was a barber, and as a little boy, I spent a lot of time in a barber shop. Uh, I have to say that you give the perspective of the barber from a position I've never seen before. I think at one point you say the barber is always behind the customer,
Hmm.
and the sounds of the barbershop, the arguments, the French developing, brewing friendships or brewing rivalries seem to spiral around him. He can contribute, but basically he's outside of the thing. He's outside of his own place.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I found and so therefore his point of view was a very well informed point of view,
Uh,
right?
to some extent, yes. I mean, he's also not quite reliable because he's very opinionated. He sometimes makes judgments of situations and people which are self-serving. But I think that's part of what it means to be a human being. So I think it shifts back and forth between events that he's very perceptive about and other situations where he's probably the last person that one would choose to be reliable because of his opinions and how he is very quick to judge.
Yeah, I believe him when he describes the facts of a situation. At one point, he refers to himself as a cynic. Did you see him as a cynic?
Uh, in part, I think he's, I guess, a well-informed cynic. I guess he is cautiously pessimistic.
Yeah, rightfully so, I think. I want to get back to Frank Wills. There was a delicious moment where he has a very brief conversation with Thelonious Monk,
Hmm.
and Monk advises him to find his own way. Um, do you, I mean, do you think Frank Wills ever found his own way?
Um, I think he's searching. I don't think he gets to a place where he's arrives at a place where he is settled into what his life actually means or a comfort level about where he has arrived at. But he's searching, and I guess that has to do. It comes out in the metaphor about him being in a dark room developing pictures or trying to develop, I guess, a reasonable facsimile of his own memories.
Yeah, as a young boy, he's fascinated with the shadow. the invisible vigilante crime fighter who remains unseen as he's setting things right. As an adult, he studies to be a security guard, a night watchman, as you point out. And in uniform and working at night, he is unseen as he diligently goes about his rounds. And now he's got a job he seems suited for. So in many ways, he's followed Monk's advice and found his own way. Yet, you give a fascinating detail. I had no idea if this is true or not. That on the night he discovered the Watergate break-in, he actually left his post to go get a sandwich.
Yeah, I think that is factual, I believe. Yeah.
That's fascinating because he wants to be this guy that he's become. He's now the night watchman, and he's rather diligent. And yet there he goes. He breaks protocol. I just thought it was a wonderful two-sentence summary of his character, that he achieves what he wants to achieve and yet puts it at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when he returns, he sees something is amiss. He notifies the police, as you say, the phone call. The burglars are caught, and his new life begins. But he's not prepared for this new life, is he?
No, not at all.
Yeah. And I wonder how someone like Frank Wills could have been prepared. Because he's hailed as a hero. And then you have this wonderful exchange where a TV interviewer says, "How does it feel to be Frank Wills if you've become one of the most recognized people in the country?" And he replies, "I think he would say that he just wants to be himself."
Hmm. I think that in retrospect, when he thinks about that exchange, he realizes that he's talking about himself in the third person, as though he's not the person that's going through this. He's talking about someone else, and he sort of falls into the trap of the host. He says, "What is like to be Frank Wills, not as what is like to be you." And I
Right.
think he gravitate. He finds himself falling into that because he doesn't quite know where he is in relation to the events that have catapulted him into this experience that he is not prepared for. He's not particularly verbal. Uh, he's shy, and he tends, as you say, uh, is is very much interested in being in the shadows. And of course, Lamont Cranston is his hero, although he's nowhere near as resourceful as Lamont Cranston, but he aspires to be someone like him. And I guess the security guard job, in some ways, is probably as close as he can get because his job allows him to break a story or to have information that he can pass on to others who will then be able to solve a crime or some wrongdoing.
Right. In fact, he does follow protocol exactly, and then becomes a witness to the action that he sets in motion. So
Yes.
he's very quickly shoved aside,
Yeah.
which is frankly where he belongs after he's done what he was supposed to do.
Yeah. It was his job. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wayne Beardsley points out that just as Wills was beginning to think and speak as himself, he was asked to talk about himself as if he were somebody else.
Hmm.
And the way that you described Frank Wills, that must have been painful for him. He must have felt very alone at times.
Yeah. Because his sense of himself is quite hazy. It seems that he gravitates or finds himself talking about himself as if he's talking about someone else, because for him maybe that's more comfortable because his sense of who he is so unclear.
Yeah. Well, this is what I love about this book because Wayne Beardsley is a fixed and firm character. But really, the book is about somebody who is in many ways unknowable. I mean, you weave in a couple of other characters who help define him for us. His mother, for example, who Beardsley describes as a woman of unavoidable directness, which is a great expression, by the way. And then there's the Lavinia Pope, a writer photographer from Ebony magazine, and they don't really agree on who Frank Wills is, do they?
No, no. His mother, Marjorie, is very protective. She doesn't approve of the way Lavinia Pope has sort of insinuated herself into Frank's life, and that she feels that somewhat, in many ways, he's being used by her in order to advance some agenda that she has, which in some ways she is exploiting him. It's not that she doesn't care about him, but she's a photographer, and her job is to take pictures and to capture people in an instant or arrest, as Faulkner would say, arrested motion, and then of course the interpretation of what she's done is up to whoever is looking at the photograph. But a photograph is in many ways unreliable because it's frozen in time, and the person who's being photographed in the next instant moves or has a different expression. So a photograph is not particularly reliable in that regard. To say, well, someone took a picture of me. Well, they took an instant, then froze it, and that perhaps that may be what you looked like or felt from the expression of what you felt, but maybe not, because an expression can be interpreted in many ways, depending on the person who's looking at it.
Yeah. I think at one point you have Wills looking at a photo of himself saying that he looks like he has done something wrong.
Yeah,
And that's his interpretation of the photo.
yeah,
Um, so all this attention that Wills receives leads to him getting fired from his job at the Watergate. Nixon's been reelected. The portrait of the country would like to forget what happened. Um, ultimately, Frank Wills is a victim, but I think he contributes to his own victimhood in a way.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's complicit because he
Yeah.
wanted the attention and ingratiates himself in it for a period of time until it begins to work against him.
Yeah. And Barkley, who wants to position himself as Frank's manager, puts him in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah,
And it seems to me they didn't care very much.
no, not really. He's interested in the moment, this situation that he can profit from, and when he feels that it's run its course, he's on to something else. His whole sort of uh, demeanor changes in terms of what he wears, and so he's ready to move on, and pretty much says they ought to just cut their losses, and and not really spend any more time dwelling on it or being pissed about what had happened.
Yeah, I think at one point somebody says it's a scam, and Barkley's position is, yeah, sure, of course it was a scam.
Hmm.
And that's not Frank Wills's position, though.
No, he believed that there was something legitimate or about what had happened and what his role in it. And he really believes that commercial or that job where he is interviewing people who have paid for the security system, and of course, since he was a security officer, that he has legitimacy, and there are these conversations, but he's not aware that this is a setup. It's completely bogus. That these are in fact actors, but he believes that there's something, that this is something that is, that's upfront, and that is something that he's actually doing that is going to be a service to people.
Yeah. I had forgotten that he's actually in All the President's Men.
Yeah, for that first shot at the beginning.
Yeah. And it's fascinating the way you portray him observing Redford and Hoffman. And he's kind of quibbling with himself about whether what he's seeing is real or not.
Yeah,
I mean, it's real in terms of that's what actors do, but it's not real in terms of what he had experienced.
Hmm. And
I think
even
it,
that's questionable because, our memories of what has happened to us, of what we've gone through, even if it's 3 hours ago, is unreliable to some extent because it's selective. It's based on what we believe or feel actually happened. But we're not in a panopticon where we can see everything, so that what he believes has happened, his version of that's different from what the director has presented in the film is not necessarily the way it was, but it clearly doesn't seem to Frank Wills that it expresses or is a depiction of what he remembers.
so who do you see as the reader for looking for Frank Wills?
Oh, well, I guess as Toni Morrison said famously, she wanted to write books that she would like to read. So I guess I'm someone I've always been curious about people who are not quite centered or not who are not the center of gravity in terms of being recognizable or having a very kind of ingratiating personality. I'm more interested in people who are not necessarily recognizable or given the kind of attention that it takes when someone is consciously trying to draw attention to themselves, sometimes because of vanity, hubris. But the characters that I'm interested in are a lot more evasive and are not clear about whether or not they want to be seen, at least seen as someone who is formidable, or whether or not they prefer to be at sort of the edges of things, and perhaps sometimes because they may want to be there, but they're somewhat inept. They haven't really mastered the moves that you have to make in order to be seen as someone who can handle themselves and who is, quite proficient, being capable of the kind of moves and presentation of oneself that you have to have if you want to be seen as present in a moment, in an environment where it's all about snapshots, sort of what can happen within, what can you present yourself as in a kind of snapshot.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, do you think that white readers and black readers will have a different reaction to this book?
I don't know. There's there defined groups of people are not monolithic, and I think that the readers, no matter what their sort of how they are defined in terms of categorizations, would have a variety of points of view or interpretations of the book.
Yeah, I tell you why I ask, and this is a long-winded way for me to get to this point, but I asked about whether Wayne Beasley was a cynic. The men in the barbershop discuss events that defined those times. The assassination of Dr. King, Malcolm X, President Kennedy. Arguments ensue, and you let us eavesdrop on some of those arguments. And as the story evolved, I began to think that cynicism was warranted.
Hmm.
But I have to confess that I've been in exactly one black barbershop in my life, and all my experiences about what happens in such establishments is via media. Um, as a writer, what assumptions do you make about your readers?
Well, that if I guess to write in a way where readers become open to the unpredictability and the complexity of human beings, that the assumptions that readers may have about characters or what they think they know about who characters are is challenged. And I think that's what writers do, because we all make assumptions about people that fit into our predetermined way in which works for us or satisfies our sense of what we know. But I think what writers do, what I try to do, is to challenge that and come at characters from a perspective that a reader might not have anticipated or hadn't considered.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I wanted, actually been trying to get to this point here through these questions. There was one passage in the book that absolutely stopped me cold. And I tell you now, I will never forget it for as long as I live. Wayne is discussing the murder of Emmett Till.
mhm.
And that the photograph of Till's mutilated body was in Jet magazine. And he says it curdled the blood. The barbershop was crowded on the day after the photo appeared in the magazine. Your character Beardsley says, quote, most of the men had come not for a haircut, but to be around other men as to not be alone in their helplessness without any women around. I have to say that hit me very powerfully. And in two ways, I could not fully access what those men were feeling, but I could observe them feeling it so thoroughly by the way you utilize the setting. You say there was complete silence except for the hum of clippers and the click of scissors. Wesley, I've got to tell you that was quite a moment for a reader.
Well, again, I didn't know that line was coming until I wrote it. I had no consciousness of what I was about to write, but I think emotionally, I was being led into trying to place myself in that environment, or my imagination to imagine what that environment might be like, or the complexity of such an environment. And so I was led to trying to find a way of expressing what was happening in the moment that no one can speak about, what that photo in Jet magazine, and how what would what would be the sounds that might be going on, what might people be not saying. And I guess I was trying to find a way to get to that would be surprising to me, or something that I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah, those are wonderful moments, aren't they? They're inexplicable too for the writer,
Yeah,
where you know where you want to go, and you get there in a unique way that surprises you.
absolutely.
Yeah. Has anybody else mentioned that scene to you?
No, you're the first person who has.
Oh, it's really powerful. Um, and again, as I say, I'm not quite sure I could feel what they felt, but you made it possible for me to have as close to a universal experience with those men as could be. And I don't know how we can ask for much more.
Well, it's, as in most things, ways in which we experience things, it's an approximation. And which is, I guess, why music for me is a much more deeply felt experience than writing or reading, because there isn't this impediment. And no one ever asked a musician what a piece of music was about, or
Right.
someone in the audience. It's what it made you feel.
Yeah. I thought when Monk said to Frank Wills that he had to find his own right to his own way, I thought you have to have a certain profound resolve and talent to be able to do it as Monk did.
Hmm.
So in some ways that was unfair advice, but nonetheless it was appropriate.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, as an educator, what advice did you give young authors about writing inside or outside their tribe?
Uh, well, human nature is not that different from group to group, or however groups define themselves. Uh, we behave in ways that are not that much different. I mean, there may be specific ways in which those experiences are couched, or they are represented, or there's certain elements to group experience. But human nature hasn't and doesn't change that much. So that's, I guess, for someone who's trying to create characters who are not from their particular sort of, I guess, as you say, tribe or group experience, I think following the sense of that we are very unpredictable, and that there are certain things about human beings that we can perhaps uh, expect that are going to occur. Jealousy, envy, rage, exaggeration. All of those things are part of being human. So I think what I try to do is to get at those elements within our personalities, which are part of our nature as human beings, and to try to do that, to try to capture those elements of human nature that will surprise me and hopefully surprise readers.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that in a mere 107 pages, you achieved a story of emotional depth that I do think is universal, and frankly I found it enviable, to be honest with you. Uh, I need to. I'm sure. I'm certainly. I'll read this book again, but I want to study this book because I think you've pulled off some magic here, Wesley. Can I ask you what you're working on now?
No.
Okay. My
You
guest on
can
this.
you can ask.
Okay. All right. Let me rephrase that. Will you answer if I ask you what you'll be working on next?
Uh, well, I have some things in mind. I'm working on a short story, but that's about all I can say. I mean, I don't really know
I got you.
where I'm headed in that respect.
I gotcha. My guest on this episode of Writers at Work is Wesley Brown, novelist, playwright, educator whose latest novel is Looking for Frank Wills, a fictionalized look at the life and times of the man who discovered the Watergate break-in. It's a story that will stay with me for a long while. Wesley Brown, thank you for joining me on Writers at Work.
Well, Jim, thank you very much for inviting me. I really had a good time having this conversation with you.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersaTworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.